Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fellow sisters, Jazakumullah khairan for joining us on this another episode and another session of the Ideal Muslimah. We welcome you to this Islamic Association of Collin County presentation and class. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you and to protect your families and allow you to be beacons of guidance and justice for humanity. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. My fellow sisters, as Ramadan comes around the corner, we will be stopping this class after next week. But till then, inshallah, we will continue to discuss the topics that we have learned. We will reflect on the teachings that were transmitted to us. And we will, inshallah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to become the best that we can be with ourselves, with Allah, with our parents, with our children, and with our spouse. Ameen. If you don't have children, then with your spouse. If you don't have a spouse, then inshallah with your future family. This has to be something that we intend to do, we intend to accomplish, we intend to gain. If we wait for the time that things come around and we'll say we'll figure it out, that's not the mindset of a believer. There is a tradition that I was taught when I was a child. Man khafa adlaj wa man adlaja balagha al-manzil. Whoever fears the possibility of an enemy approaching, they leave in the middle of the night. وَمَنْ أَدْلَجَ بَلَغَ الْمَنْزِلِ. Whoever leaves in the middle of the night, they get to their destination, meaning they get to safety. You don't wait till the storm is upon you to say, oh, I'm going to figure this out. No, you plan beforehand, you work in a meticulous manner with planning and a strategy and a goal, and you work. So it doesn't matter how young or old you are. It doesn't matter if you've not been married or you're going to be married, inshallah, or you were married and you don't know if you're going to get married again. These teachings of Islam is about preparing ourselves to be the best in all spheres of our life. Doesn't matter if you have not reached the age of puberty and you're not worshiping Allah yet. These ages are to prepare us to worship Allah perfectly when the time comes. It doesn't matter if you don't have that relationship with yourself. It is time to build that phase and that zone so you can have a conducive relationship with yourself. You are a composition of body, mind, and soul. How could these three work harmoniously in that gelling occurs, a symmetry occurs, they come to sync? How does that happen? Well, that happens when you work on it. So, my connection with Allah, my connection with myself, my connection with my parents, these are very important. My connection with my spouse, my connection with my children. We have completed, alhamdulillah, 5 steps of the 10 steps of this tree. If the sisters who joined this class over a year ago, they remember that the example we gave of this book was a tree, and we talked about the roots, and then we talked about the bark in different phases. The bark is now complete. The next 5 items are going to be the branches. And inshallah, that will then give way to the leaves and the flowers and the fruits, inshallah. But till then, you and I need to make a lot of work. Yes, this is a sister's class. And yes, this book is written for sisters, the ideal Muslimah. Alhamdulillah. But there is always something that I can learn from this. And the men who listen can learn from this also. And that is why we teach the ideal Muslim the third Saturday of the month for the men folk after Fajr. And of course, the sisters join us also who attend for Fajr before breakfast. But nevertheless, inshallah, I make a commitment, inshallah, if Allah gives me the ability and the life, that we will do this in a more rigorous manner for the menfolk also, inshallah. Why? Because we are not going to be successful as Muslims until or unless we embody the qualities, we embody that mold that will allow goodness to form from us. If we don't make the foundation in the mold, then all the knowledge that we are learning is like tossing your seeds on top of a stone. It's not going to grow anything. You'll be lucky if even something sprouts on top of the rock, but it's not going to go too far. So what we have to do, my fellow sisters, is let's make this serious. Let's make this personal. Let's take this as our personal conviction. We're going to make this happen, inshallah. So, assalamu alaikum to all of you again. Please feel free to text your messages, your salams, your questions. For in our sisters class, we begin with questions. So if anyone has any questions, any thoughts, any concerns, please feel free to text them, inshallah. If you don't want to do it right now, or it's something you are planning to do later on, inshallah, I will pause the class to respond to your questions, concerns, thoughts, or whatever else it may be. So, without further ado, today we are entering chapter 6, the sixth of 10 items of consideration. And this is a Muslim woman's relationship with her son and or daughter-in-law. Her son-in-law, her daughter-in-law. Now, subhanAllah, um, this takes us back to the Desi and Arab cultural thoughts that the mother-in-law is the wicked person and the mother-in-law intrudes on the life of the son-in-law and the daughter-in-law. It's a cultural phenomenon that has taken so much precedence over, it has taken precedence over reality to the extent that people feel they're evil. Like the daughter-in-law would feel the mother-in-law is evil, or the son-in-law, or vice versa. My fellow Muslim sisters, this should be the opportunity when love multiplies, when one's motherly love is doubled up with one's mother-in-law's love, right? If a person is a son of their mother and now they marry their wife, that wife's mother should become like a mother also. The whole purpose of Islamic relationships is to increase that connection, that buffer zone, the protection, the love as these families grow. So when you are born, mashallah, for those who are blessed, they have both their parents. And as they grow, then they have their siblings. See, this buffer zone is growing: parents, siblings, and then their uncles and aunts and their cousins and their grandparents. It's just this wide protection that's happening. Muhammad Ali, wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. Thank you so much for joining, my young brother. So as these things grow, and then they get married, of course, by that time, possibly grandparents may have passed and uncles and aunts, who knows. But then when they get married, a whole new family becomes their family. And so instantaneously it doubles up. It not only fills voids, but it doubles up. Now they have an extra family to look out to and to seek help from. But my brothers and sisters, our so-called culture mindset is that they are your enemies. Your mother-in-law is like kryptonite to Superman, and how this is gonna be dangerous, and she's out to ruin your life and your marriage. I understand those mindsets are a bit far fetched, but the culture has opened ways for that thought to prevail, from your Bollywood movies and from your cultural mindsets in the Indo-Pak and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Burmese region. That's what I can speak of. I don't have any Arab blood and I have not seen the culture there, but I've heard this culture is everywhere. So this author tells us, how do you, as a mother-in-law, treat your son-in-law and daughter-in-law? Are there teachings in regards to this? Should we put our cultural garbage and guard down, or just throw it out of the window? Sorry, the window's that way. Throw it out of the window and then treat them like a human being? See, my fellow sisters, today I'm coming to, and I've got my issues that I'm dealing with today, but you see, the way we treat each other as human beings is unacceptable. And the day that we shun the ill treatments of human beings, Allah will punish you and I with the same treatment. As Muslim communities, we need to grow mature, and we need to realize that treat each human being like you would want to be treated. Irhamu man fil ard yarhamukum man fis sama. The Prophet Muhammad said, have mercy on the people of this earth. The one in the heavens will have mercy on you. It's time that in this so-called social distancing quarantine era, that we create mercy in our hearts for each other. If we don't have mercy, Allah will never give us mercy. And if we deprive people of our mercy, Allah will deprive us of His mercy. And if we become a source of harm, Allah will open the doors of hell on us. And I mean that literally. So this is also in that context. How are we treating each other? If your daughter or son was to choose someone who is a Muslim, who is their future spouse, and the parents discuss and the parents agree, instead of having that hoo-ha a crying moment on the stage saying, I will treat her or him like my son and my best son. And let's be that person. Let's really be those people. The ones who now, as we are parents, I'm a parent, many of you are parents, we have to show that maturity to our children. We have to show that leadership to our children. We have to show our commitment to our children. And we have to show that same commitment for our in laws, our son in laws or daughter in laws. So let's get into what the author is informing us and what the Prophet Muhammad is educating us on. In regards to her daughter in law, her attitude towards her daughter in law, the Muslim woman who understands the teachings of her religion and who is of a high character regards her daughter in law as she regards her own daughters. Well, the author is saying your daughter in law is like your own daughter, okay? Fate has made this woman the wife of her son, and she has joined the family and became one of its members. So, subhanAllah, if she was to join in the blood of your son, into the family of your son, now she is your family member. Similarly, when the young Muslim woman brought up with Islamic values and attitudes leaves her parents' home and goes to her husband's and begins a new matrimonial life, she regards her mother in law as her own mother. So the teaching he's giving us is very simple. Look at the sacrifices being made. When a lady leaves her home and she goes either to her husband's home or she goes to her in law's home, whatever it may be, financial situations, whatever, she's giving up her life. And if that alone doesn't bring mercy into our heart, then there's something really wrong in here. We have to ask this. Why don't we see that someone's given up their entire life for our son? We have to really ask ourselves. So she should see the family she gets into as her adopted family, and those who receive her should acknowledge her as her family also. She knows how to make a good choice in selecting a daughter in law. So now the author is going back and saying where the mother should be a part of the process of the daughter in law so that she can understand that the best character person is coming through for my son, and of course, then grow that relationship. Before any marriage takes place, it is very important for both potential mother in laws and potential daughter in laws, to be very careful in making the right choice. And unfortunately, this book was written like 30 years ago. Nowadays, that doesn't happen. Many of our children find their love to be on apps or on websites or in these conferences, and very little, work is done between making the families understand each other. So what happens is that when seeking spouses for your son and or daughters, a mother must examine each candidate's religious commitment and character and look for a second upbringing and good reputation. See, the whole purpose of getting married isn't about what degree he has or what money she has or what jobs they work. It's not about all that stuff. It's really about the character that is going to join with the character of your son so that it combines to build and inshallah transmit these characteristics to the children that they're going to produce, inshallah. Islam is very simple. The whole purpose of marriage is reproduction. There's no ifs and buts about that. We get married because then an act becomes lawful, which is otherwise unlawful, and the purpose of the act is to have children. Very simple. And so the purpose here is that a whole life is beginning for life to begin from it. And so make sure that the character, the qualities, the values are there. We raise our children with values, and we should join our children with people of values. That's what the author is trying to say. When the wise Muslim woman looks for a wife for her son, she always bears in mind the fact that this will be a new daughter joining her family, one who should enjoy the same respect and love as her own daughters and will share the duties within the framework of the greater family. So, of course, when you bring her into the family and make her a part of the family, not only should she have a share of the love and the care and the treatment as your own daughters, but she also should pitch in with your own daughters as to the chores and the work of the home. We all live in a home, and I tell my kids the same thing. We all live in the same home. None of us are here on a vacation, so we all pitch in. So it's only fair that we all love each other in the same way and we all work together the same way. This is not a slavement that, oh, she's here now, tell your daughters to go do her pedicure and manicure and tell her to do the cooking and the cleaning. It's not like that. Everyone is hands on deck. This is everyone's home. So when you make it everyone's home, that means everyone is a vital part of making that house into a home. She should want for her new daughter in law nothing but success, happiness, and stability in marriage. So the wise mother will not be attracted only by the apparent physical beauty of the proposed girls, she will also require her future daughter in law, first and foremost, to be strong in her commitment to Islam and to be a good and balanced character. This is in accordance to the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad. A Muslim woman may be married for four reasons: her wealth, her lineage, her beauty, and her religion. Choose the one who is religious. May your hands be rubbed in dust. This is a very common Arabic lingo where you say taribat yadak, may your hands be rubbed in dust. Means like may you remorse if you don't follow the advice. Like may you say like I wish I did it. That's what kind of means hands rubbed in dust. The fact that today, and I want to be honest with you, especially parents and future in-laws, um, the way that we've considered marriage is very derogatory, and the way we market, and I'm going to say market our daughters and sons, is very disgusting. You look at your ISNA matrimonials that they used to send out in their magazines or in the conferences, people talk about the tall, the shape, the size, the beauty, the color of the skin. When someone says, my daughter is pure white skin and she's looking for a nice, handsome man who is successful, I ask you, sisters, and please respond to me on this, what are we trying to accomplish? Does that mean someone with dark skin is bad? Does that mean someone with black skin is unacceptable? Does that mean someone with olive skin is deformed? What does that mean? When people make these statements, it's not one. I've read so many of these because we've been doing marriage workshops and discussing the predicaments that happens in the course towards marriage. Alhamdulillah, I've done this many times before, but the point is this: when we present our daughters or sons in this fashion, which doesn't talk about their characteristics, a kind, noble, generous human being that always goes out of their way for other people, these are things that people want to know. Not that they have blonde hair, their body figures like this, they're this tall, they are this successful, and they have white skin. I really cringe because that shows the racism in our Muslim community. We are racist, and I think we all need to accept that. Racism is ripe in the Muslim community. The religion, the people that the Prophet who was sent to and that we follow was the Prophet who abolished tribalism, racism. He killed it, he finished it off, but we have brought it back. For example, within the nations, look at us. If you're Pakistani versus Indian, or if you're Pakistani in Bengali, or if you're Egyptian versus Jordanian, if you're Yemeni or if you're Syrian, we look at each other as inferior. Why does that happen to us? And if our son was to bring home a lady, a girl who is from a different color skin, a different culture, a different race, many of us would go ballistic. And the question isn't, are you trying to diversify? Are you trying to vary outside of your religion to show that you're a tolerant Muslim? No, it's not about that. It's about finding the person of qualities, the person who is rooted and stable with qualities. In the absence of that, everything else is only a recipe for disaster. And in the presence of that, the absence of everything else is perfectly fine. And so this racism is so rampant within us. If you even look at Punjabi versus Sindhi, I have relatives on both sides, or northern Indian and southern Indian. There's in one country there's so much divide, and there's so many walls that we have built. We are the people who follow a prophet who taught us that color of people's skin, their race, their cultures is irrelevant. Illa bi taqwallah. What is the defining factor is their respect and reverence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unfortunately, this is a thing I'm preaching that many of us and myself may not really understand, and it comes to a much later time. When it does come to sense, it's a bit too late. But nevertheless, the Prophet ﷺ said a person marries someone because of their wealth, their lineage, their what you call beauty, or their religion. And the Prophet ﷺ said deen. And deen we talked about before for the sisters, they know that. Deen doesn't mean Islam, it means that their commitment to their religious practices and values. فَظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ. Follow the one, go after the one who is a person of character and morals and qualities, a deen. Taribat yadak, may your hands be rubbed in dirt, meaning may you regret if you don't go down this path. So we're learning quite a bit, mashallah. Let's move on. She knows her place. On the basis of this correct understanding of the daughter-in-law's position in marriage and her position in the new family, the mother-in-law treats her daughter-in-law properly and fairly in all circumstances and at all times. The fairness, the love that we as parents have to give to our daughter-in-law has to be one of fairness. You have to be fair and you have to treat her as an equal of the family. She is not anything more or anything less than what the family is. It never crosses the mind of the Muslim mother in law who is filled with Islamic values that this woman has stolen the son whom she spent long years bringing up only to be taken away when he reached the age of manhood and became able to work and make sacrifices by a wife who would lead him into a happy home where he would forget everything that his mother ever did for him. Such evil thoughts never occurred to a righteous Muslim woman because she understands the laws of Allah that apply in this life, and she knows that her son, to whom she taught Islamic values from early childhood, cannot be made to forget his mother by his beautiful wife, just as a daughter-in-law whom she chose for a son from amongst the good, believing young women would never accept for her husband to forget his mother in this way, which is precise disobedience forbidden in Islam. So beautifully put out. When the mothers have this mentality that my handsome, successful son is now taken away by this lady, she's the witch, she put a spell on him and she took him out of my life, and that is a vehement hatred that's created because of this baseless mindset, is something that the author says believing woman would never have. A believing woman would say, I have prepared this man to be a good husband and a good father, and he is going to go forward and create so many more goodness that all that goodness will be in my name and all that goodness will be my love. So he will then be in one son, create that love and instill that love in his wife. Now you will have two people loving you, and then their children, 3, 4, 5, however many be, they're all going to be that loving character to the mother, because the mother says, I let go of my son. I have educated him. I have raised him. I have trained him. I have prepared him. I have instilled the values in him. Now when he's in his peak and prime of success and ability to do so much, let him go and make his family, and let that love of that family continue to multiply on me in return. Saying that, oh, she stole my son and I'm going to do bad to her, is again a baseless, ignorant cultural mindset which prevails even in our so-called cultures. She should know that her son will never forget her and never put his mother down, just as she knows that the wife that the families chose together and were part of in agreement for him to be with is a lady who has values and qualities that will never tell her husband to forget his mother. If she feels any stirrings of jealousy at some moment of human weakness, she seeks refuge in her faith and fear of Allah. Yes, we're all human, and sometimes you may say, oh, this lady is not good for him and she may be doing evil. What does the author say? Seek refuge in your faith and fear of Allah. She sheds those hateful feelings and returns to a proper opinion of her daughter in law. This is the attitude of the righteous believers, men and women alike. When they are struck by some evil thoughts, they turn to Allah. My fellow sisters, we all are human. And sometimes someone could sow some evilness in our head, some bad thoughts in our head. Shaitan can do that. And we may start succumbing to those thoughts that, oh my God, how can this happen? This is bad. So when you get these types of feelings, the Quran tells us, my fellow Muslim sisters, I am going to say this as an open heart. None of us is better than the other. I am as human as you are. I am as vulnerable as you all are. We all are. We are all humans and we all can fall into the trap of shaitan. See, shaitan's trap isn't so much as a hole that you fall in as it is like a mouse trap. You can walk into it. But if that happens to you, then you turn back to your faith. And I'm told to turn back to my faith and seek Allah's protection from becoming worse in this. And that's what the Quran says in chapter number 7, verse 201. Those who fear Allah, when a thought of evil from shaitan assaults them, وَالَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا. They remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then they see aright. Whenever something evil comes in your mind against someone, say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Can we all say that, everyone? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Let us say that again. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. We have to tadakkaru, remember Allah. If ever evilness comes into your heart against your daughter-in-law, your son-in-law, your son's in-laws, anyone, any human being, matter of fact, let's go outside of this subject matter. Anyone we feel illness towards, say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, because that's all shaitan needs to do is insert the thought. Shaitan will come and drop it. Now what you do with it is your action. The fact that you received it. How many people come and put letters and advertisements on your doors? Some people have a sign, no soliciting. We know that no soliciting sign is your A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Don't even come to my door. Don't even come into my house. But if you don't have the sign, the people will leave their flyers and brochures and propaganda. The question is, when you open the door, do you want it to come in or not? You can throw it in the garbage. So in the same way, if these thoughts come from shaitan, do you want to entertain them or not? Do you want to enter them into your head or do you want to throw it out? That's totally up to you and I. And so the Quran says, those who fear Allah, when a thought of evil from shaitan assaults them, they say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and Allah then allows them to see the light. Hence, a balance is struck between the daughter-in-law, the mother-in-law, and the husband. The matters may ruin their natural peaceful course unaffected, and matters may run their natural peaceful course unaffected by misguided whims and desires and governed instead by religious reason and wisdom. I can't even begin to tell you, my fellow sisters, how many cases in over a decade and close to a decade and a half that I have dealt with in marital issues, and how many of these issues had something to do with in-laws. So brothers and sisters who are watching, and especially for our sisters, let us not be the reason of our children losing their relationships. Just say, for example, if you have issues with your daughter-in-law and you feel that by taking your son back from this wicked witch, na'udhu billah, I'm going to have my son back, know that you have ruined his life forever. You see, nothing is perfect in the beginning. Marriage has to be built over time. It's a process. It takes years, if not over a decade, to make it happen. And so while they're working on their marriage, the best thing you can be is a support beam for them, not a destructive hammer for them. Do not destroy, especially then when they get longer in this marriage, then the emotions become more tangled and more stronger. And if you try to rip it, it's like ripping a fully grown tree from the earth. The roots are so strong, you're going to be ripping the earth with it. And if they have children, and if you feel that I want those children and my grandchildren to be with me, and I don't want that lady in our life, na'udhu billah, you have ruined those children's life. Remember, Allah knows our intentions. Allah knows what's in our heart. Allah knows what's in our heads. And Allah will ask us on the day of judgment about that. So why is it that instead of being the reinforcement, we are becoming part of the problem? I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open our eyes to see the truth, because this is very unacceptable in anyone's eyes for us to wish ill on someone else because of our biasness towards another person. Moving forward, she gives advice but does not interfere in the private life. A mother will always give advice. A mother is mandated always to be a mother. A mother is not a best friend. A mother is not a pen pal. A mother is not a Facebook friend. A mother is a mother, right? So, in doing so, the mother will always give advice. She has to. She trained her child. She brought up her child. She disciplined her child. And now she needs to give advice to her child as long as she's alive. Whoever's mother is alive, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extend their lives with barakah, and may Allah make them a means of goodness for the family. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. And whoever's mothers have gone from this world, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow their du'as and their goodness of love to stay with all of us till our death. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. So what happens is that a mother will always give advice. And as mothers, we need to continuously give advice to both our sons and our daughter in laws and everyone else. From the moment her daughter in law is brought as a bride to her son, the wise Muslim woman remembers that her daughter in law has the right to live her married life in all aspects, so long as it remains within the limits of Islamic teaching, and that no one has the right to interfere in the private life of the spouses except in cases where it is essential to do so, as every Muslim is required to give sincere advice in accordance to the Prophet's words. You cannot interfere in their marital life. You should wish the best for them and you give advice to guide them on that. Yes, if they're doing something immoral, unacceptable, then your advice should come from the heart of care, not from the heart of criticism. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ad-dinun nasiha, our religion is sincere advice. Let us give sincere advice to one another. The Muslim mother-in-law's the Muslim mother-in-law's standard in her behavior towards the daughter-in-law is similar to her behavior to her own daughter. How do you treat a daughter-in-law? Just like you treat your daughter. How do you treat your daughter? Just like the Prophet ﷺ told us to treat our daughters. If you are treating your daughters in a derogatory way, then that should not be the treatment of your daughter-in-law. Rather, it goes back to the treatment taught to us by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just as she wants her daughter to be happy, or to have a happy, successful, independent matrimonial life, undisturbed by any interference in her private life, she should wish the same for her daughter-in-law with no with no exceptions. If you want that your daughter, when she gets married, should not be told by her mother-in-law how to do, what to do, you want her to have an uninterfered life of happiness, then you should also facilitate and provide that life for your daughter-in-laws who are in your homes. Even if they're not in your home, they're in your life, so they're in your homes. She respects her and treats her well. The good Muslim mother-in-law respects her daughter-in-law and treats her well. She makes her feel that she is loved and appreciated. She listens to her thoughts and opinions, approving and encouraging those that are good and gently correcting those that are mistaken. In all of this, the mother-in-law's aim is to be fair and just. She judges her daughter-in-law exactly as she would judge her daughter if she were in her place, and where there is an opinion to her daughters as her mother and in accordance with the word of the Quran. The way the advice is given is not derogatory. It is where there is opinions that can be given. It should be given with love, care, and with sincerity. Allah says in chapter 33, verse 70, O you who believe, fear Allah and always say a word directed to the right. Say the word that is always directed to right. Everything we say, good or bad, joke or in seriousness, should be directed towards what's right. We should not sway away from that. She does not omit to express the joy that she feels from time to time when she sees her son is happy with his wife. This adds to the best feelings that her son and daughter in law feel. Similarly, she does not forget to include her daughter in law on various occasions, just as she thinks of her daughters, so she lets her accompany them and makes her feel that she is one of them and that she is beloved member of the family since she is married to her beloved son. When you then have these relationships, be a part of their joy. Be a process of making those memories of joys. And when you have your memories of joys happening, when you have your occasions of joys, always remember to call her. It starts from simple things. For example, well, I told your husband, why didn't you come? No, just like you would call your daughter and your daughter's husband and invite them to come to a family reunion, for example, you should do the same by calling your son and calling your daughter-in-law. Make each person feel the same. Do not underestimate or undermine one because of the other. Just because you tell your son doesn't mean you've told your daughter-in-law. And just because you told your daughter doesn't mean you told your son-in-law. The amount of love and courtesy that we would have with our daughters, we should have with our daughter-in-laws also. So he says here, in this way, the mother-in-law becomes dear to her daughter-in-law because she knows that her daughter-in-law is dear to her. This is in direct contrast to the practice in the backward Jahil societies that have deviated from the guidance of Allah, where hatred and despicable plots between mother-in-law and daughter-in-laws are the norm, to such an extent that this enmity has become a traditional in inevitable phenomenon about which there are many folks have sayings and popular songs. None of this could have happened if both the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law had really respected one another, right as outlined by Islam, and had stayed within the limits prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why the traditional enmity between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law disappeared in those societies that truly embraced Islam and adhered to the teachings of Islam and its values. Excuse me. So, subhanAllah, the Jahil mindset is that the daughter comes into that home with her gun and her ammunition ready. She's ready to go to war with the mother in law. And the mother in law receives her with her gun, basically. I'm talking metaphorically, that they're ready to go at war with each other. My brothers and sisters, this is so wrong. And to allow this ideology that whenever the mother does an act of kindness to the daughter in law, whatever the daughter in law does an act of kindness to the mother in law, there's this discussion in your brain saying, oh, she's trying to win me over, or she's trying to deceive me, or she's trying to do this to me. Why do we have to start on the foundation of wrong? Why can't we ever start on the foundation of right? Why can't we ever start on the foundation of justice and what is supposed to be upright? These are things which we need to be real about, and we need to say, if there's a cultural phenomenon existing in your lives, in your families, in your homes, in your society, where everyone puts down the daughter-in-law, the mother-in-law needs to sit down and have a face-to-face with her daughter-in-law to be and say, look, I love my son. I've sacrificed a lot for him, but I want to love you the same. I will take every hard feeling that would ever develop in my heart out of my head. And if I need to, I'll talk to you about it. But I want us to have a loving relationship because Allah wants us to have that also. When you bring Allah in the equation, not to use and abuse Allah, but actually to use and enhance the blessings and love of Allah in the house, it's a whole different thing. And the daughter-in-law can be open also. I would perceive you to be an evil, wicked person who may have some agenda against me, but inshallah, I'm going to do my best to be the best daughter-in-law to you, and I'll be like a daughter to you. Have these open conversations. Don't allow the mindsets to only fester deeper and into darker places. Going on to the next subject matter, he says she is wise and fair in her judgment of her daughter-in-law. People have this critique. They have the eyes of critique, and they always want to look down upon other people. As a mother, as a mother-in-law, as a sister, Muslim sister, she is wise and fair in her judgment of her daughter-in-law. A mother-in-law finds herself being tested by a daughter-in-law who is not of good character, who does not treat others well. Here we see the need for the mother in law to exercise wisdom and sophistication by repelling evil with something better, as stated in the Quran. In chapter 41, verse 34 and 35, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, nor can goodness and equal be equal. Sorry, nor can goodness and evil be equal. Good and evil is not equal. I'm sure we agree with that. Idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Repel evil with that what is better. Then will he between whom you was hatred become as if you are friends and intimate. وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا, and no one will be granted such goodness except those who exercise patience and self-restraint. وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا ذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ, and no one but the persons of great good fortune can receive this. Let me explain this. Very important point here. You see that your daughter in law has flaws, open flaws, character flaws, um, has moral issues. Fine. Now, what is your option in your head? Get her out of the family? No. Rasulullah SAW welcomed, even in his presence, Umar bin Khattab, who was coming with the sword to kill him. He said, sit down. There is a way to mold humanity. I don't know why we feel it's a do or die situation. Everything, you don't. There's no angels out there to our fellow mother-in-laws or mother-in-laws to be, and father-in-laws to be. There's no angel out there. Your son or daughter is not going to get married to an angel that falls from the sky that's going to look like the most beautiful Yusuf alayhi salam or Hur Ain. It's not like that. We need to wake up and snap out of this fantasy. And reality is, my daughter-in-law or son-in-law, and of course they're talking about daughter-in-law right now. The son-in-law subject is coming up. But when they come into my house, I am gonna work as a family with love and wisdom to make each one of us the best of the best. Not that, okay, I'm the doctor now, you're the patient, I'm going to show you how to fix yourself. If you go in with that mindset, doesn't matter how articulative you are and how eloquent your words are, you're going to cause harm. So, what happens is when you see character flaws, when you see things, you don't point it out. You don't or tell them with your eyes. You let it pass. And when then with wisdom, with kindness, with loving, you positively reinforce that. You bring something better. Instead of what you call it, instead of saying these words are bad and these words are good, stop saying these words and say those words. You teach her through your ways to say these words have always had an impact on me, and it's had an impact on the people around me. It's something good to try. So that's called positive reinforcement. You're not showing them their faults and then telling them what to correct. You're showing them something better, that they are smart enough to say, I will stop saying these things and I'll start saying these things. Allah says, idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Repel evil with something better. Don't push them and knock them down because of what they're doing wrong. Rather, show them something better and allow them to be guided towards that which is better. One way in which a mother in law may repel evil with something better is by concealing her daughter in law's negative qualities and mistakes from her son as much as possible. Meaning, how many times mother would go to their son and say, oh, do you know what your wife did today? You know what your wife is like? You know what your wife said? This is not how it goes. You have to be a shield of haya and shame and care for your daughter-in-law in front of her husband. And you're supposed to talk the good about her to him while you help her better herself to be that goodness. So you're supposed to work both sides of the aisle to make this marriage stronger, not to break this marriage. We don't know and realize that some of our words actually break the world. We have to be very careful about that. Sorry, subhanallah, I think I need some water, but bismillah. Sorry, it says here, advising her daughter-in-law on her own and explaining how keen she is for the marriage to continue on the basis of love and good works. So as you're telling your son about only her goods, you're working on her to make that good become practical. The mother-in-law should continue to advise her daughter-in-law until she rids herself of those negative qualities, or at least minimizes them. Thus, the daughter-in-law will feel she has a sincere, loving mother-in-law, not a fearsome enemy who is just waiting for her to stumble. Now, when that relationship builds, it takes a few instances for them to be connected. When the daughter in law sees the love and commitment from your side, I promise you she's committed to you. It's only human that that would happen. But we're looking for that one opportunity of that goodness to actually come forth and grow and show itself. The wise Muslim mother in law remains fair and just when she judges between her daughter in law and her son. If she sees her son mistreating her daughter in law, her awareness and fear of Allah prevents her from siding with her son at the expense of the truth. So she does not support him in oppressing his wife or in doing wrong. So this is another cultural phenomenon. If she does something wrong, if the daughter-in-law does something wrong, we're going to scream it so loud that her parents are going to hear it across the oceans. But if our son does wrong, we will side with our son in doing the wrong. My dear brothers and sisters, as I said today, injustices need to stop. These injustices have caused Allah's destruction to fall on us. Remember, the Prophet Muhammad said, Allah does not punish us for our evils in this world. He saves those punishments for tomorrow, except for two things: the disobedience of parents and the transgressions occurred. Allah punishes that immediately. There's transgression going on in every street. There's transgression going on almost in every home. The transgression of how we side, how we take sides, how we say, when we do what we do. These are acts of transgression. And if you're thinking transgression means killing, or what's happening to the Burmese or the Palestinians or to the Syrians or to the Uyghurs, let me step back. What is transgression? وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي غَيْرِ مَحَلِّهِ. Putting something in a place it's not supposed to be placed is transgression. That's enough for a transgression to be categorized as transgression. Transgression is al-dhulmu dhulumatu yawm al-qiyamah. Transgression is darkness on the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's curse is on the transgressors. And what are we going to say? Oh, that's that king or that president or that this people or those. Don't think big, think small. Because transgression starts from small and then it becomes big. And so if we are not able to identify the transgressions that we are committing, we have transgressed so much that Allah's mercies run away from us. So one of those forms of transgression is where the mother will always side with her son, and he's never wrong, but she's always wrong. Her son could then physically, verbally abuse the wife, and the mother will say, he did right. Acha kiya beta, you did good. Na'udhu billahi min dhadik. If we treat a human who is someone's daughter in this way, what will Allah do then to us and our daughters? Remember, the world is very unique in its cycle. وَمَن نُعَمِّرْهُ نُنَكِّسُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. Allah in Surah Yasin talks about that cycle, that it exists, the cycle of time and cycle of life. And I was talking to a friend the other day and a brother who said, never hurt the people that you pass going up, because you're ultimately going to pass them again when you come down. No one stays up forever. Every plane that takes off has to land. And every plane that lands will soon take off. This is part of life. It's an up and down. And so to treat people wrong, the curse is very hard to carry. So the mother-in-law, who is a true mother-in-law, will never support one over the other. This is not blindness, blind allegiance. Like, I live in Dallas, so I have to follow a Dallas team, for example. No, I could live in Dallas and follow another team. I don't have to be blindly aligned to my city's love for a team. Not everyone should love the same team. Same way, just because this is my son and that's my daughter-in-law doesn't mean he's always right by default and she's always wrong by default. Have the ability to be true. That, oh, my son, you did wrong. You can chastise your son because you're a mom. You have the right to do so. And you could love, in a loving, caring manner, teach your son, your daughter-in-law how to be right also. But you can chastise your son because he's your blood. But you shouldn't do that to her, and you shouldn't only do that to her when the wrong comes from both. As I say, it takes two hands to clap. It doesn't happen by one. So Allah says in the Quran, in chapter 6, verse number 152, whenever you speak justly, even if a near relative is concerned. Doesn't matter if it's your own relative. Speak just. And then Allah says in chapter 4, verse 58, and when you judge between a man and a man, then you should judge with justice. Meaning, if you judge between two humans, it should be justice. It's not like, chalo beta, don't worry, I'll take your side. Because what you're doing in that, you are creating a wedge and then a crater between a husband and a wife. And tomorrow, if his relationship goes sour and his marriage ends in divorce, the cause would be us. We are the cause. And what baffles me, my fellow sisters, and for the brothers who are watching or who will watch, is that some of us go through this phenomenon in our marital lives. And instead of learning from the pain that we go through, we actually want our kids to go through that. And that's so wrong. If you are in a relationship where the mother in law is not the best human being, that should inspire you and give you the conviction to be the best mother in law to your daughter in law. But if it's like, okay, it happened to me, and the only way I'm going to feel happy is by doing it to someone else, that is a wrong thing to do. So at this point, we're going into the son in law. The son in law is the next topic of discussion. It's not going to be much different, but there are some pointers that we will learn. Her attitude towards her son in law. The attitude of a truly guided Muslim woman towards her son in law is no different than her attitude towards her daughter in law. As the author is saying, she treats her daughter in law as if she were one of her own daughters. Similarly, she treats her son in law, sorry, as if he is one of her own sons. Just as she wants her own son to be one of the best people, so she should also want her son in law to be one of the best people too. She knows how to make a good choice in selecting a son in law. She makes a good choice by selecting a son in law, accepting none but one who is religious, well mannered, who has a good reputation, as the Prophet Muhammad encouraged Muslims in the Hadith. If there comes to you one with whose religious commitment and character you are pleased, then marry your daughter to him. If you do not do so, there will be fitna and widespread mischief on this earth. I want us to remember this hadith, my fellow sisters. Very important. If man ترضون دينه وخلقه فزوجوه إلا تفعلوا تكن فتنة في الأرض وفساد كبير. The hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if a man comes to take the hand of your daughter, and this man, this boy, this young adult is a person of character and religion and has nobility, not money, has nobility of character and is real as a human being, فزوجوه, marry your daughters off to them. Illa taf'alu. If you don't do that, if you discard a person who is of values, who is of moral character, who is of nobility and religious commitment, takun fitnatun fil ard. There's already a punishment. There's going to be strife on this earth, and there's going to be all out mischief. In seeking a spouse for your daughter, in seeking a spouse for her daughter, she is not attracted only by smart appearance, high status, or plentiful wealth. Remember, what did the author say? She is not attracted only by a smart appearance, high status, or plentiful wealth, because she knows that by marrying her daughter to this man, she is going to gain a son to whom she will entrust her daughter's honor, life, and happiness, none of which may be protected or properly taken care of except by a man who is well mannered, religious, noble, and moral. Remember, at the end of the day, money comes and goes, and degrees come and goes, and jobs come and go. But realistically, someone who, with his character and his guidance, will preserve, protect, and enhance the nobility, character, and goodness of your daughter. This is really what means everything. The Prophet ﷺ told us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about if people are poor, marry them. Allah will make them rich. Allah says this in the Quran. يُغْنِهِمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ إِيَّكُونُوا فُقَرَاء. If they're poor, if the guy is poor and your daughter's poor, marry them off. يُغْنِهِمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Allah will enrich them from His fadl, from His treasures, from His bounty, from His grace. No one can do that. No money can do that. Allah can do that. But what is the criteria? Again, going back to those matrimonials, we have a handsome Hrithik Roshan type of husband who is, mashallah, going to the gym, and he's got an MBA, and he's got his doctorate degree, and he's a professor, and he drives a Porsche and a Ferrari. What does that mean? Are you selling your sons and daughters, or are you trying to find the best journey partner for them? These type of derogatory matrimonial posts only go to show what we have made marriage to be. And I'm not going to say it. I hope you understand it. This is not a transaction. This is not about your fame and your prestige and your honor. It's about the characters that will bring forth goodness in your home, will make the home multiply into homes of goodness. That's what it's about. So now you have a son in law. How do you treat him? She respects and honors him. Not surprisingly, her son in law is on the receiving end of her honor, respect, and appreciation. At every opportunity, she makes him feel that he has become a member of the family by marrying her daughter. So she wishes him and her daughter happiness and success in their life together. She lets him know that he is the one to whom she has entrusted the precious honor of her daughter, and in whom she places her hopes for the achievement of her daughter's fondest wishes. She makes him feel that she is a second mother to him, so she does not withhold any advice or spare any effort to do whatever will bring happiness to him, his wife, and his children. She helps her daughter to be a good wife to the husband. Not only as a mother in law that we help the son in law, but we make the marriage work. In both a son in law and daughter in law scenario, our jobs is to make the marriages work, not the marriages to destroy. The wise Muslim woman never ceases to offer advice to her daughter in ways that will be of benefit to her in running her household and taking care of her husband and children. She always points out to her daughter anything that will please her husband and make him happy, and encourages her to undertake the duties of a wife and a mother in the best way possible. If she notices any shortcoming, negligence, or carelessness on the part of her daughter, she hastens to correct her and advises her, and helps her to make up for the shortcoming, so that there will be no reason for her son in law to look down on her daughter. She does not neglect to mention her son in law's good characteristics from time to time, so that her daughter becomes more fond of him and more content with what Allah has given her. In this way, a mother becomes the greatest help to her daughter in consolidating her marriage and making it a happy one. The next topic is, and inshallah we'll cover this topic and we will inshallah not only finish this chapter, but we will also conclude for the day as we enter chapter 7 next week, and that will be our final discussion till the end of Ramadan on this topic, because we have a whole new Ramadan series coming out very soon. Stay tuned, inshallah. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. But it's going to be about the Muslim woman and her relatives. And then we'll get to that, inshallah, next week. But let's finish the son in law today. She is fair and never biased in favor of her daughter. Same thing as we talked about the daughter in law and the son. The Muslim mother in law is always fair in her opinions and judgments if any misunderstanding arises between her daughter and son in law, or if she notices any failure on her daughter's part to be a good wife, or to perform her domestic duties, or to take care of her husband's legitimate desires. She does not stand by her daughter. Rather, she speaks words of fairness and truth, as commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran itself. Again, those same verses. When you speak, speak justly, even if it's a near relative. And in another verse, and when you judge between people, you judge with justice. If she notices that her daughter tends to take a lot of money from her husband and spends extravagantly, then her words of advice to her daughter are not heeded. She speaks out, explaining to her daughter the error of her ways and pointing out how she has transgressed the limits laid down by Islam with regards to spending, uh, as it has been outlined in the Quranic description of the honored, truly guided slaves of Allah. Chapter 25, verse 67, Allah says, "Those who, when they spend, are not extravagant and are not niggardly, but hold a just balance between those extremes." SubhanAllah, I'm amazed he's talking about this. You know why? Because one of the key issues that causes problems in the marriage is finances, is money. And that money is all based on expenditure, and that expenditure is based on expectations, and those expectations are based on something baseless. Why is finances becoming a problem in every marriage? Rich families, poor families, it's finances. It's all down to those expectations. Remember, your son is always your son, and your daughter will always remain your daughter. Your ability to advise them and to correct them is your mandate and duty upon you. It is a mandate and a duty upon you to help correct your family, your children. Doesn't matter if they're parents of their own or their husbands and wives, they have to be corrected. So, subhanAllah, if she noticed on her daughter's part an excessive power and tendency to undermine her husband's honor in qawama, she hastens to explain to her daughter in the clearest terms that men are qawamun over women. When it says that men are protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has given the one more than the other and because of the support from their means, it doesn't mean that man is the king and she is the peasant. Na'udhu billah. It means that the buck stops on him in Allah's eyes, that he is accountable and responsible on the day of judgment for everything that happens in the home. So as a team player, when you respect your captain's decisions, you do the same with a marriage. In the marriage, Allah has made the man the captain. That means the responsibility goes on him and the accountability goes on him. It doesn't mean he does it how he wants. It means that they do it collectively, and those decisions, the weight of it is bared by the husband and the son-in-law, as we're talking here. So if a mother-in-law sees her daughter being very disrespectful to her husband, it is a mother's duty to teach her daughter that this is unacceptable, because these type of actions, if not pointed out, lead to strained marriages, which lead to divorces. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this men this important advantage role is because of accountability. Again, the mother-in-law who is adhering to Islam and who is wise and fair does not differentiate between her son and her son-in-law. Just as she wants her son to fulfill his role as qawam over his wife and to conduct his marriage wisely, seriously, and in a manly fashion, so she wants the same thing for her son-in-law too, even if that means that her daughter has to face some level of correctness because of what justice demands. Just as Muslim mother-in-laws will criticize her daughter-in-law if necessary for any extravagance that she may notice out of the compassion towards her son, she will always also criticize her own daughter if she oversteps the limits in order to be fair and just in obedience to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever you speak, speak justly, even if it's your near relative. Lastly, there's always going to be problems in marriages. The mother-in-law's role is to deal these problems with wisdom in a wise fashion. A son-in-law may be of a certain mentality with which his wife and mother-in-law do not feel at ease, which may result in a mutual dislike and arguments. In such cases, the duty of a mother-in-law who understands the teachings of Islam is to approach her son-in-law in a diplomatic manner, taking into account his particular mentality and nature, to deal with him wisely and never to despair of reaching her goal with a measure of patience and persistence. She is always very careful never to exaggerate her son-in-law's negative points to her daughter, rather so long as those negative aspects do not affect his religion or moral character and do not warrant the end of the marriage, she tries to make them look as small as possible, while striving to deal with them by legitimate means and wise methods. Thus, the mother-in-law who is truly guided by Islam becomes a blessing and a source of goodness for her daughter and her husband, offering solid support to their marriage and proving by her fairness and piety that she is indeed a second mother to the husband, not the traditional enmity or not the traditional enemy of the couple, as she is often described in backward Jahil societies, where comedians tell funny stories of the everlasting enmity, which is in fact in the result of a Muslim's failure to properly apply the laws and values of their religion. We may well imagine the great happiness felt by both families, her son's family and her daughter's family, towards this wise, sensitive, and pious mother-in-law, when she is sincere and loved by both her son-in-law and her daughter-in-law, and this love is reflected in her happiness for both families. By virtue of her taqwa, fairness, and goodness to her son and daughter-in-law, she increases the happiness of her daughter and son and contributes to the comfort and tranquility of their families. How beautiful are the deeds of the intelligent, believing mother-in-law, and how great is the need of her sons and daughters' families for her. So, subhanAllah, beautiful. Beautifully summarized, beautifully completed. That the goal should be that you gain as a Muslim woman the admiration, the love, the respect, the honor of your son and your daughter, your son in law, your daughter in law, your family, and their families. It's a task. But you know what? You don't have to waste money on it. You don't have to spend exuberant amounts of money on it. You don't have to give speeches. You just have to be loving in your heart. And that's why the connection with Allah will produce love in our heart. The connection of Allah will produce mercy in our heart. The connection of Allah will make us true human beings. Jazakumullah khairan to all of you for your participation and your time. Alhamdulillah, this was again another great session. As we said last week, we're not going to go beyond an hour because those mothers who are right now with their children and those wives who are busy with their homes or their jobs or whatever it may be, for them to catch up on an hour and a half recording, they have said is too hard for us. So within an hour, they want to catch up. So for those of you who attended today, spread the word. Let's talk about these things. Let's make these our discussions in our homes and our social gatherings. And let's allow others to be part of this discussion. Changing the culture is our responsibility because we are the ones who've been practicing the culture. And we are the ones who have seen the culture practice amidst us. Now the goal of changing this culture of hatred begins with us. May Allah allow us to be the true game changers. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khairan to all of you. Take care, be well, stay strong, stay healthy, connect with Allah, and ask Allah to change the status quo. May Allah bring forth goodness for all of us. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.